Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name's Carly Stevens. I'm a teacher and author, and this is English Nerd. If you've been enjoying all about Dante's Inferno, check out the All About Hamlet and All About A Tale of Two Cities series that I have on my channel. I also have some free resources on my website, carly-stevens.com, if you would like some ideas for how to teach Hamlet, or if you're writing an essay, there's a free self-editing checklist that you can go through. So yeah, carly-stevens.com, make sure to check it out. Today we are in the very last few cantos of Dante's Inferno. I'm going to be talking about Canto 33 and Canto 34. Canto 33 is a bit of a rough one. Canto 34 is fascinating, and I really enjoy talking about it every year. So without more description, I'm just going to dive right on into what I want to say. So last time, Dante and Virgil made it all the way to Casidas, Circle 9, for the traitors, and they've been in there for a canto already, and this is just going deeper into that icy area where the heads are sticking up. In fact, Canto 33 picks up where Canto 32 left off, where Dante sees these two figures frozen together, and one of them is gnawing on the other's neck as though he's consuming him. So Dante's gonna ask that guy his story, and it's not a pretty one, but it's got to be talked about. In Canto 33, the story begins this way, line 13. So Dante asks who he is, and this person is actually not reticent about describing his identity as Bocca was. In fact, he's very open about it. Line 13, I was Count Ugolino. I must explain. This Reverend Grace is the Archbishop Ruggieri. Now I will tell you why I gnaw his brain. So the Archbishop is the one that he's attached to in the ice. That I, who trusted him, had to undergo imprisonment and death through his treachery, you will know already. This apparently was a fairly well-known story during Dante's time. These two plotted together. I don't know all the details, I'll be perfectly frank, but they plotted together and each really betrayed the other at different points. What you cannot know, he goes on, that is, the lingering inhumanity of the death I suffered you shall hear in full, then judge for yourself if he has injured me. So before I start this honestly rather disturbing story, you've read this section, I assume, if you're watching this video, and you know that it gets pretty gnarly, is that Ugolino is also a traitor, but he does not talk at all at any point about his own treachery that he committed. He's focused entirely on what Archbishop Ruggieri did to him, which makes sense, as you'll see. It was incredibly unjust and horrific what the Archbishop did to him, but also there is none of that acknowledgement of the severity of the sins that he committed, which, if he had acknowledged those in life, would have absolved him of that sin and allowed him to go to, if not paradise right away, purgatory. But here he is, even though he did suffer a lot at the end. So he and his sons are in this tower waiting for food to arrive, I believe, and then they start hearing just hammers nailing up the gates. So line 46 is where the story picks up. And from the base of that horrible tower I heard the sounds of hammers nailing up the gates. I stared at my sons' faces without a word. I did not weep, I had turned stone inside. They wept. What ails you, father? You look so strange, my little Anselm, youngest of them, cried. But I did not speak a word nor shed a tear, not all that day nor all that endless night, until I saw another sun appear. Okay, so the story goes on, but a couple things I want to address right away is that this child sounds like a very small child, maybe a 6-year-old or something, just the way that the person is being described. However, at least historically, the children of Ugolino, because he was a real person, were grown adults. Even his grandchildren would have been in their teens. So it doesn't get rid of how horrible it is that these innocent people were nailed in this tower with him, but he definitely is playing up the pathos of what's going on even more than the real situation, which would have been enough to gather some sympathy. He doesn't speak. He doesn't comfort his children, or perhaps his grandchildren. He just goes completely interior. He does not help them in whatever way he can, right? It says, when a tiny ray leaked into that dark prison and I saw staring back from their 4 faces the terror and the wasting of my own, I bit my hands in helpless grief. And they, thinking I chewed myself for hunger, rose suddenly together. I heard them say, Father, it would give us much less pain if you ate us. I mean, good Lord, this story is absolutely brutal. So they are in this tower for so long that they are starving, and this is the assumption that the children make because the father's not communicating anything to them. There's really nothing to be done. I don't want to victim blame the father too much, but I'm trying to get at what Dante's doing here with this story, which is one of the very last ones that we're going to hear before the end of the Inferno. What are we supposed to be getting out of this? It's difficult not to pity Ugolino and his situation, and Ugolino's right when he prefaces his whole story by saying, I mean, you have a heart of stone if you don't feel sorry for what's befallen us. But kind of like with Francesca, is it sad? Absolutely. But there are these little red flags throughout, things that indicate that maybe he was a little bit more at fault than he's admitting. I don't know, places where he could have found that redemption had he acknowledged some of his involvement in what happened. I just don't really know. This is a story that I talk about every year, and I'm never quite sure how to approach it. I'll just throw some of my ideas out there, and then you do with it what you want. That's one of the nice things about classics. You can interpret them in a variety of legitimate ways, and it's not just one simple answer, but instead it's something that we can continue to kind of unpack as time goes on. So, to make a terrible, terrible story short, his children all pass one after the other. And finally, he says, line 75, then fasting overcame my grief and me. So the implication is that he passes next, or last, after the children. But there's also some very gruesome speculation about what lengths his hunger drives him to in that moment. I don't see a huge amount of evidence. There is some to suggest that he, I don't know, you can fill in those blanks yourself. I mean, he's chewing on Archbishop Ruggieri as though he's consuming him. So, is it possible? Yes. Do I want to talk about it more? No, I don't. It's too horrible to contemplate. So yes, treachery, we see the terrible potential fruits of treachery through what Archbishop Ruggieri did to Ugolino. We really don't know the extent, according to the version that we have here anyway, of what Ugolino did. It was inevitably terrible as well, but at least what we get is just how bad treachery is, the sin that's being represented here, because that's how Ugolino and his entire family starved. Okay, so let's move past Ugolino. If you read Thomas Carlyle's Past and Present, his essay, he was a huge name in the 1800s in England. He's much less so now, but he makes reference to this at the end of his Past and Present. it's a book. It's like an essay. So these references do exist. So they continue on. Dante sees that there are some souls trapped in the ice, but their eyes are shut because their tears have frozen over. It's so cold there, and they can't lower their heads because they're frozen up to here. And that prompts Dante to ask about the wind, because there's this wind that is keeping the ice frozen. It's not a warm wind, it's a freezing wind. And Virgil says you'll find out in just a moment, so I'll let you know in just a moment too. Before he moves on, Dante talks to one more person, Friar Alberigo. Let me make sure I'm saying that correctly. Alberigo. Friar Alberigo, who is one of those who betrayed a guest. It was a guest and a family member. He hired assassins to exterminate them, and the code phrase was "bring in the fruit." And so apparently Friar Alberigo's fruit became kind of this like phrase that people would say to reference that. It was like a pop culture type of reference. The thing to take away from Friar Alberigo's encounter with Dante is that this is the only section of any of the circles where it says that this happens. So line 124, I'm sorry, a little bit past that, 123. Or I'm sorry, 6. I just say random numbers. Sometimes it's terrible. 126. Dante is really shocked when he recognizes Friar Alberigo, because he had thought that he was still alive and he had not passed. But then the friar says, that you may more willingly free my spirit of this glaze of frozen tears that shrouds my face, because he wants the freedom to weep, but his eyes are frozen, so he can't. I will tell you this: when a soul betrays, as I did, murdering the guests, it falls from flesh, and a demon takes its place, ruling the body till its time is spent. The ruined soul rains down into this cistern. That's horrifying. So with a crime that grievous, that horrific, at the moment of bringing in that poison fruit, or signaling the assassins, or whatever that meant, his soul immediately went to this section of the Inferno. And even though the body was walking around, it was like a possessed demon body. I mean, I don't know. All of a sudden we're in some kind of paranormal something. It's a terrible idea, really compelling, and I'm not sure what to do with it. But apparently this level of just the worst of the worst sins suggests that there's just no coming back from it, I guess. Because everybody else had the option for salvation up to the moment of their death, but it's up to the moment of this decision for Dante here. My goodness. Dante generally shows through the Inferno his opinion of the badness of mankind. Of course, we're going through all these different sins and bad things and whatnot, but I mean, if you just look at how this is upper hell, those intemperate sins, these are the malicious, more serious sins of lower hell, and there are only 3 circles represented here, and there are 5 circles represented here. And I show you that just to, I can't remember if I have, so I might as well do it again if I did. When people do terrible things, when they turn from God, I think Dante is saying that more often than not, it's this very intentional kind of thing. A teacher that I teach with very recently said this fascinating thing, that that the Inferno is this inversion of the human soul. You start with the appetites. So the soul, the way that you would visualize the soul for a long time was that you had reason, you had the will, or spirit sometimes people call it, and then the appetites, and that was the correct order. A well-ordered soul would have the reason ruling through the will, the appetites. A disordered soul would be the opposite. But here we have the appetites, people who are ruled by their passions, their appetites, at the top. And as the crimes get more intentional and cerebral and human, relying more on reason, they get deeper down, because there is this gift of reason and humanity that was given to us that's been perverted. It's not just our animalistic side, but it's our human side that we're using to do bad things. And I thought that was really fascinating. I immediately agreed. I was like, yep, I see it. All right, that brings us to the final canto of the Inferno. We've made it, just about. Canto 34. I mentioned in the intro video, I believe, the importance of number symbolism in the Inferno. There, in fact, in all of the Divine Comedy, 3 is the most important number. It reflects the Holy Trinity. We have those 3 line stanzas throughout. Paradiso and Purgatorio each have 33 stanzas. Here we have 34 because 4 is associated with fallen mankind. And according to Dante, you get the 3 of the divine, the Holy Trinity, and then fallen mankind. And this is the natural result. And the number of cantos supports that. Also, when you add up those 3 parts of the Divine Comedy, all of the cantos add up to 100, which is a number of perfect completion. So a lot of things are going on there with the choice to have 34. So Dante and Virgil, they go, and Virgil says, look straight ahead. Can you see him? He's in there. And Dante sees something kind of like this windmill, and we see through Dante's eyes as he gets closer that it's Satan flapping these wings, and it's through flapping his wings that he's creating the wind in this portion of the Inferno. So this is line 19, looks like 19 or 20. Virgil says, now see the face of Dis. Remember, there was that gate of Dis. It's a very old name for the devil. This is the place where you must arm your soul against all dread. Do not ask, reader, how my blood ran cold and my voice choked up with fear. I cannot write it. This is a terror that cannot be told. I did not die, and yet I lost life's breath. Imagine for yourself what I became, deprived at once of both my life and death. This moment when Virgil says, okay, look at the face of the devil himself, marks an incredibly symbolically important moment in Dante's journey. This has been, yes, an epic, in some ways a fan fiction adventure story, but it's also been an allegory that works on a couple of symbolic levels. And Dante in the allegory is a lost soul finding salvation, finding redemption. Virgil has been human reason and human capabilities apart from God's spirit. And so here, Dante has seen all of these different sins. He's acknowledged them. He's come face to face with his own darkness. And here he is, as far away from God as can be possible to go in Dante's universe. He's looking at Satan, and he says that he lost life's breath. Imagine for yourself what I became, deprived at once of both my life and death. This dark night of the soul, this kind of death is a very important moment in spiritual growth. Traditionally in Christianity, you think about baptism, and there's you're going under the water and you're imitating the death and then the resurrection of Christ. There's a part of yourself that needs to pass away so that it can be replaced by the life of God. So in a lot of ways here at the very end, Dante is imitating Christ. Imitatio Christi is the term for that. So here it says he's not alive, he's not dead, there's part of him that is fading away, and he has yet to kind of step into this new life that he needs in order to actually find salvation on the other side of this. So this is a big moment for him. So he looks, and Satan is described in a lot of detail, so I'm going to talk through some of that. It says, line 37, what a sense of awe. With what a sense of awe I saw his head towering above me, for it had 3 faces. So they all merge together. It's kind of, it all merges on the shoulders, but he has 3 faces. They're all different symbolic colors. But I don't really know what the colors are meant to symbolize, and there are different interpretations, so I'll leave that out of it. But the 3 face part is really clearly an unholy trinity. It's a mockery of that holy trinity, just like the sea of glass, ice coming out from him is like a mockery of the throne room of God. It's this horrible inversion of what is right. This is the exact opposite. And then it says, under each head 2 wings rose terribly. They're like bat wings, and he beat them so that the 3 winds blew from him in a great storm. It is these winds that freeze all. Casitis. So this is super ironic. I really enjoy this detail because he's weeping, he's flapping, and it shows that Satan himself is not a lord of hell. He's not sitting on some throne, enjoying what's going on around him. He is also being punished as a traitor. The traditional story goes that Lucifer was the highest, brightest, most beautiful angel in heaven. He betrayed God, and he was cast out of heaven. So he also is a traitor who's being punished by being trapped in this ice, just like the rest of the other traitors. But by flapping his wings, he's trying to escape. Theoretically, if he were to stop flapping his wings, if he were to acknowledge the seriousness of treachery and say, yes, I deserve this, and stop struggling to get out, then the ice would melt and he would be able to go free. Theoretically, that's not going to happen, but I love how Dante adds that it feels like a possibility. It's such a cool detail. And then so he has 3 mouths, 3 heads, right? In every mouth, it says he worked a broken center between his rake-like teeth. The 3 people are Brutus and Cassius, who betrayed Julius Caesar, and then in the front mouth, it's Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus. I have looked up some reasons why Brutus and Cassius are there. Like, I get why, in Dante's mind, they would belong in this section. Those who betray their rightful masters. I could see why Dante might put them there, but to put them in the very mouth of Satan himself, I haven't seen anything that satisfactorily explains why that would be. Judas does make sense. Judas betrayed Jesus, and so I get what he was doing there. Now, Judas gets a slightly different punishment than Brutus or Cassius. Brutus or Cassius is they're both being chewed by the side mouths, and they are legs first, and Judas is head first, and he's being scratched by the claws as well. The reason I point this out is that if you picture him with his legs kind of kicking out, it should be reminiscent of the simoniacs. The simoniacs back in Circle 8, Bolgia 3, where it was the corrupt church officials who bought and sold religious favors and things like that. So it's reminiscent of that type of sin, but it's compounded to be much more serious with Judas. So I think that parallel is worth bringing up. Okay, so they've reached the bottom. It's not like they can just turn around and head back out. That would take forever. So Virgil says, okay, let's go up closer to this thing and then we're going to go down the hairy goat legs, because I forgot to mention that, they have hairy goat legs. We're going to go down even deeper. Now this would be so scary. As Dante, can you imagine? Like, what is there? What is there further down? Anything? But as they start going down, the way it's written is a little bit confusing. They start going up, and so I want to explain what's going on here, because it's brilliant. It's just a little hard to grasp at first. So here is the world, right? Dante's world. There is the Inferno, which is like a big funnel that goes down into it. Satan himself is the center of gravity. So he is at the center of the earth. This is the idea. And this works symbolically really nicely, because there's this gravitational pull of sin and pride and doing the wrong thing. You're always kind of pulled in that direction naturally. And so he's right there in the middle. And so in order to go up, the way up is the way down. So they go down. They're going to go past the center of gravity, and then, so you turn it around. Just like if you were to theoretically drill all the way through the earth, at a certain point you'd stop going down and you'd start going back up, because you passed that center of gravity. And that's what's happening with Dante and Virgil. They pass that center of gravity, and then they start going back up, and now they're going up the other way. And so even though it's the Inferno on this side, it's Purgatory, the Mount of Purgatory on the other side. Hopefully my hand gestures made that a little bit clearer. I'll see if I can find a map for you. But yeah, so the way up is the way down. It takes that acknowledgement, that facing the darkness, that sort of inner death, in order to come into a new life and be cleansed and freed and forgiven, and actually find help in life on the other side. This is a typical idea, not only in Christianity, but in, just even modern therapy. You face things, and then you're able to move past them, even though it feels like you're just going down. The way up is initially the way down. It's such a cool metaphor. So Dante and Virgil continue to climb, and they're headed upward. And then we get to the very end. Before I read the very end, I realized that I forgot to mention in one of my first videos that when Dante and Virgil enter the Inferno, it's on Good Friday. If you look up, the year 1300 and where the stars are and all these things that I have no interest or expertise in, then you find that that's the case. Good Friday commemorates the day of Christ's crucifixion. And 3 days later, after Christ's crucifixion, he rises again from the grave, victorious over sin and death, and has victory, right? The possibility of salvation for all. And traditionally speaking, during those 3 days, he goes down into hell and calls up those who had waited for him faithfully. I bring that up now because if you look at all those stars and whatnot, then this last bit happens on Easter. So they were down there in the Inferno for 3 days, another 3, a very significant 3, and now they're coming out of this grave, essentially, this place of doom. And line 136, it says, "My guide and I crossed over and began to mount that little known and lightless road to ascend into the shining world again. He first, I second. Without thought of rest, we climbed the dark until we reached the point where the round opening brought in sight the blessed and beauteous shining of the heavenly cars, and we walked out once more beneath the stars." I think that is just gorgeous. If you remember back when Dante talked to Brunetto Latino, stars represent this hope of heaven, much like it does in Lord of the Rings and in so many different places, things that you're already familiar with. And this translation is not the only one that ends with stars. If you look at the original Italian, if you look at any translation worth its salt, it ends in stars, because Purgatorio and Paradiso, the final word of each of those books, is stars as well. No matter how dark and horrifying and hopeless things seem to get, abandon all hope, you who enter here. I love that even this, the darkest installment of them all, ends with this idea of hope, that just ahead there is this hope for Dante, there's this hope for you, the reader, and as long as you're willing to go on that journey, there's this beautiful hope of belonging in a place that is lovely and meaningful, and you can put the darkness behind you. So it's a wild ride, the Inferno. There are parts that are beautiful, there are parts that are challenging, there are parts that are just downright rough. But I think the overall impression that I get from the writing and the message that we're left with at the end is really a beautiful one. So I hope you enjoyed talking about the Inferno with me, or listening to me talk about the Inferno. Make sure to subscribe for more English nerdy goodness and get those notifications, because there is more coming. Different English nerdy things, literature, writing, all that good stuff. Like this video if you like it, and I will see you next time. Bye.